again, welcome back to my channel. I've got another 5 children's books for you today. The first book that I read is The Nothing to See Here Hotel by Stephen Butler and illustrated by Steve Lenton. Yeah, I did get that the right round. That's good. And this was an incredibly bonkers read. It's about Frankie, who lives in the Nothing to See Here Hotel, which is a magical hotel for monsters, ghosts and all sorts of weird random magical creatures just outside Brighton. And how to describe this book? It's pretty insane and it's very well illustrated. You've got Frankie there and there's lots of cool text and all sorts of stuff like that. So this hotel, most of the guests are magical creatures of some kind, and one day Frankie's hotel gets a mysterious visitor in the middle of a storm, and it is a goblin rider who is there, who's come to announce that the Goblin King is coming to stay for a holiday. And the whole hotel goes into this massive disarray to try and get ready for this king's arrival. When the king finally arrives, he is an absolute nightmare. He's the worst guest ever. He just takes over everything and causes so much trouble and gets loose in Brighton, and it's absolute chaos. And this whole book only spans, I think, 2 days. So it's a very, very quick read. It's very bonkers, very silly. And I only gave this book 2.5 stars, I think. And I think I even dropped that down to 2 stars. And it's a shame because this could have been like a 4 or 5 star read, I think, but the main issue I had with this book was it had some quite damaging racial stereotypes and was it didn't acknowledge them at all, and that was quite difficult. I can actually find you my big issue. So even in the illustrations, I don't know how well you can see this, but clearly Frankie and his mum, they're from some kind of Indian, South Asian background, and this Goblin King is dressed in very stereotypical like Indian headdress and turban and all this kind of stuff, and his entourage, and there's like belly dancers, and he's just such a horrible person. I think the representation is a really big issue in here. Frankie and his mum are made to do some quite degrading things, and it felt very uncomfortable to read the further it got, and there was no kind of acknowledgement of it at all. So that really damaged what I thought of this book. And also the second book looks like it does a similar thing but with the Romani culture. So I'm a bit like, I'm very unsure about this series at the moment. So yeah, that one was a bit of a shame. The next book that I read though was also another very funny, silly one for younger readers, and this is The Chocolate Factory Ghost by David O'Connell. This book is the first book in the Dunoodle mysteries. It's also illustrated. It's got very cute illustrations. I enjoyed these a lot. And this is about Archie McBudge, I think is redhead one, and he inherits his great-grandfather or great-grandfather, somebody's chocolate factory and estate. And so him and his mum move into this big estate, and while his mum's sorting out all the boring details of like running a actual business, Charlie has to take on this quest set by the ghost of his grandfather to prove himself as a real McBudge. And it's a very silly quest. It's got like hidden passages and trick suites and puzzles and all sorts of fun like that. It was really fun. Everything was sweet related. The twist at the end was really good, and I loved the relationship between these 3 characters, and there was some really interesting nods to the privilege of an inheritance like that, and how Archie then kind of became oblivious to everybody else's kind of financial issues, which in a book for probably like year 3, year 4, that's pretty good, I thought. So I really liked that. The only thing that I didn't like about this book, which stopped it being from a 5-star book down to a 4-star, was some of the names in this book are quite, I don't know, unnecessarily gross, which felt a little bit jarring in a book full of sweets and sweet things and chocolate and fudge and all this kind of stuff. I felt like that kind of theme maybe would have been a bit better than Lock Flick My Bogey, Glen Bogey, and there's also a character called Mr. Hanky Crust. And so I was like, where does all the snot themed things come from? It just felt a little bit out of place when everything else was very sweets and chocolate themed. So that was the only thing that dropped it down, but this is a really fun book, so I really recommend that. The next book that I've got, I don't have a copy of. It's another book that was sent to me by NetGalley, and I rated this one 3 out of 5 stars, and it's The Boy Underwater by Adam Barron. And this one I'd heard a lot of good things about on Twitter. A lot of the teachers that I follow were talking about it, saying it was a great book, really emotional, and this one didn't really appeal to me. So I requested it on NetGalley, thinking I'd rather try it out first, and I found it quite difficult to get into at first. The writing style jarred a bit with me because it's written first-person direct address to the reader quite often, and I don't really get on with that style because usually the character will assume that you're a certain kind of person. So in this case, the main character was constantly assuming I was a year 4 boy, and it was a bit like, no. So it felt a little bit alienating. I'd have preferred something that didn't directly address the reader quite as often as this book did. But once I got into it, it's definitely picked up a lot. It's about a little boy called Cymbeline Igloo, which I love that name, it's so cute, who has never been swimming before in his life. His mum has never taken him, he's never been allowed to learn, and when his teacher announces they're doing swimming lessons, he kind of keeps it to himself. But he also gets himself into a bit of a trouble by boasting that he's a really good swimmer to the bully, to the class bully, which doesn't obviously work out very well. So when he has to be rescued from this pool and he accidentally loses his swimming trunks, he thinks his life is over, but really his issues aren't the biggest issues that happen. It massively affects his mum. She has to go into hospital, and suddenly his life really is a big issue, and all these secrets are spooling out everywhere. His family, his uncle and aunt's family, they're all in a bit of chaos themselves. His friends are all having issues, and it's a very good book for showing the kind of empathy of other people, how this character goes from being very kind of insulated in his own world and worrying about his own things, and then realising that other people have a lot going on as well, and that impacts a lot on those around them, and they don't always realise that they're doing it. There's a lot of lessons on empathy in this book, and it was really sweet in a lot of ways, and I loved the ending. I think it was quite powerful, but it did just feel a little bit weak in certain areas to me, I think. And I'm not sure why particularly. It might be again to do with the writing style that just didn't sit with me, but I think it's a really great book to read aloud, especially in classroom settings. It'd be a perfect book for year 4s. There's a lot of kind of politics of what it's like to be a year 4 in this book, so that was quite interesting. So I only gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, but I still really recommend it. It's definitely one of the more interesting books that I've read this time. Next book that I read for Booktubeathon, even though I didn't end up doing Booktubeathon as like a filming it thing. But I read 5 books for Booktubeathon, and I feel pretty good about it, and this was one of them, and it's George by Alex Gino. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. This book was extraordinary. I didn't really know much about it going into it, and I'm very glad that I didn't, because this turned out to be the book that I needed. I read this book in about 3.5 hours, 3 hours if that, really quickly, and it's about a girl called George who everybody sees as a boy, and this immediate reversal of the way usually these stories are told was so refreshing. It's so nice to see a book where it's not the character's worldview that's challenged, but the world's view of the character that is challenged, because it's the world that is not seeing her for who she is, not her not seeing herself. And I really loved that. It felt so real to me, and I haven't really talked about it, but I have been kind of going on a gender journey myself for the last year or so. Now I identify as non-binary, and that is a journey that took 25 years. That is a long journey for me, and it really makes me happy that there are children out there who can read this and see themselves in it and know that it is okay to be who you are. Go away, motorbike. It's okay to be who you are, and that they can find themselves a lot earlier than I did. But the plot of this book. So George's class are reading Charlotte's Web, and George loves this book, and George really wants to play Charlotte in the school play that they're going to be making of this book, but she's not allowed to be because she's a boy. And this book does a very good job of highlighting how many ridiculously gender-focused things there are in school that are so unnecessary and so damaging, especially for kids like George, but also for just all kids. Like, it's so unnecessary and so just awful. And the attitudes of different teachers and other classmates, and the relationship between George and her best friend, I've forgotten her name, what's her name? Kelly. And they were just so adorable, and I loved them, and their families were both great as well. George's relationship with her brother is just pure gold because it's so realistic and just so unexpectedly nice. And I adored every page of this book. It's a very quick read, it's very confidently written, very well written, very sensitive to the issues that the author is writing about. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely adored it. I think this should be in every school classroom and every teacher should read it. It's a fantastic book, and I can't recommend it enough. It makes my heart feel very happy. The last book that I read is also another 5-star book, and this is The Legend of Podkin One Ear by Kieran Larwood, and this is another buddy read that I did with my friend Charlie at Charles Heathcote, and I'll link his channel down below. He also loved this book as much as me, which is great. It's really nice when you read a book and you both enjoy it. I always feel so guilty if I read a book and the other person doesn't like it. It's like, oh no, I've just failed you completely. So, but me and Charlie, we've been pretty much on the same page for every book that we've read, so that's been great. This book I've been looking forward to for quite a while. It kind of gave me Redwall vibes, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to dive into a world like that. And I was very right. It's a lot like Redwall, but it's a lot darker. About Podkin, the lazy son of a chieftain who is murdered by the invading, what they call Goyle? I can't remember. Gore? Begins with G. Gorm. Who, they're kind of like the bad guys, and they are, I don't really know what they are yet, but they're kind of like a representation of industrialization, kind of like evil enchanted metal creatures, and they are proper terrifying. So they murder his father, and him and his 2 siblings, oh no, what are their names? Can't remember their names. Oh, it's gone very dark suddenly. I'm sorry. So Podkin and his 2 siblings, they escape out into the woods, and they go on this rip-roaring adventure with all sorts of chaos and fights and puzzles to solve and issues that they face and friends that they make to get to safety and to get revenge on the Gorm. And this is the first in the series, so I think the only thing that me and Charlie really commented on was that it didn't feel like a full story, and I don't think it's meant to. I think it ended in the right place. It was a very satisfying ending that left me definitely wanting more, but not feeling like I've been cheated. So I'm really, really excited to read book 2. I can't wait. It's a beautifully written book. There's lots of really great rabbit lore and things like that. There's a great sense of history and lots of mysteries and questions that I'm dying to know, that I'm hoping will be revealed in later books. So I really, really enjoyed this one. I thought it's very confident, very compelling. I think I read it in like 2 days flat. It was a really quick read for me. The only other thing that I had issues with was like some of the language was a bit odd. Like there was a lot of like men and women mentioned, but in terms of rabbits, that felt a bit odd because they've got their own names for those kind of things. But other than that, fantastic book. So those were my latest reads. If you've read any of these, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. They were great fun, apart from the one that I didn't really like. But the others were great fun, and if you've got any recommendations for me, I'd also love to hear that, because I'm totally up for, I've got a massive TBR, as you've seen, but I'm totally up for more recommendations because I have a pretty good library. So yeah, and until next time, thank you for watching. Bye.